How we doing, folks? My guest today is going to be Britt Cox. Britt is a four-time Olympian and former world champion in freestyle mogul skiing from Australia. And in this episode, we discuss her illustrious career. We touch on how she got her start and how she got into skiing and what drove her at an early age and continues to drive her today. We also talk about and discuss the fact that she's recently retired and the next phases and steps in her life. I hope you folks enjoy this episode, and please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Really had a great time chatting with Britt, and I really think you're going to enjoy it as well. Thanks. That's what I'm talking about. Britt, thank you so much for taking the time. We were able to work out the different time zones and everything. You know, probably just have been easier if we had done this in Australia. You know, I had brought all the equipment down too, but you know, I don't know, those early mornings.
It all the way.
I did bring it all the way down there, and then I had talked about it a little bit too. It was like, you know, I was talking with like Emerson or Morgan, like, oh, it'd be cool to like, you know, do a little recording while we're down here and just, but you know, those 5 a.m. Ski tubes kind of get in the way.
The days end up getting pretty long in Jindabyne, so it's understandable. And this works. So.
Yeah, this works all right. Yeah, you know, COVID had a few positives. Yeah, of course, absolutely. So first and foremost, I mean, congratulations on just an absolute fantastic career. And I mean, how does it feel to kind of not totally be closing the page? I mean, you're still around and still involved, and you know, a lot of the events this winter down there, you presented a lot of the trophies and did a lot of the social media, and still definitely like around, and definitely still like skied some really, really nice middle sections. I think you could have, you know, definitely could have competed and had some really good training, but finally you've moved on. So congratulations.
Thank you. It's kind of bittersweet. It was definitely a very difficult decision to make after Beijing. I hadn't decided before the Olympics what I was going to do moving forward. I just told myself about a year out from the games that I will think about it after the games when the time comes, and just to give myself the space to be completely focused on Beijing and the season and my skiing, and not have the stress of that in the back of my mind. So when I got home from Beijing, started to ask myself that question of what I was going to do, and also had that question asked to me by pretty much everyone. It's a logical question to ask. So there was a lot of time to think about it. And initially I was like, yep, I want to do another year. I really want to compete higher DD on World Cup. I was doing a D spin on snow in training, but I hadn't competed it. And I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. And I think I was kind of riding that high of the Olympic Games, and just having such a fulfilling experience over in Beijing made me excited. And I just love mogul skiing. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do it. And then sort of started to sit down with one of my mentors, because I'm actually studying Bachelor of Communications, majoring in journalism and PR, and interested in that sports journalism space and media and presenting. And I have a mentor back here in Australia who's helping me with that. And he asked me what are you doing? And I was like, I don't really know. I think I'm going to keep skiing, but do you think there are any opportunities for me? And he started to explain to me some opportunities in the communication space. And I think for the first time ever, I got really excited about that. It was the first time I'd ever been as excited, if not more excited, about something other than competing mogul skiing. So I think for me, that was kind of a bit of a wake-up call, and it made me realize that I was ready to challenge myself in different ways, and not close the chapter, not close the book, but I guess just turn the page into a new chapter.
No, that's really, I mean, really, really exciting. And it's a great field to get into. And I mean, it seems, I know from watching you on social media and everything, you've already presented some award shows and kind of work on some of that public speaking and some of those things. And you went and did the Young Olympic Ambassador program kind of after, and got to tour. And that seemed like it was a really, really cool experience.
Yeah, I mean, I still want to stay very closely involved in sport, especially winter sport in Australia. And that's part of the reason why I went up to Perisher and Mount Buller for the two competitions in Australia this season, is to still be involved, both in a sense of mentoring younger athletes. We've got so many young up and comers in Australian freestyle skiing at the moment, but also working in the media. And I had an opportunity earlier this year to take part in Victorian government Women in Broadcast program, Women in Sport broadcast program. And cool. That sort of opened my eyes up to a few different opportunities where I was able to host a few events for Women's Photo Action Awards, Sport Action Awards, and also saw the opportunity to go over to the Young Olympic Ambassadors program in Greece. And that was kind of around about the time I was toying the idea of retiring. And gotcha. It ended up being a really nice summation of my Olympic experience, where I learned a lot about the Olympic movement and the values of Olympism that I didn't really know when I was an athlete. And it sort of made me realize that I can continue to live out those values in my life post competitive athletic career. And it was just nice to be in a community of, I think it was about 130 different people, 2 from each country that are involved in the Olympic Games, to learn about the history of the Olympics, the values of Olympism. And the theme for that program this year was how that can be communicated by digital media. So it combined my 2 passions into one. So it was really nice experience over there. And there was a little bit of partying as well, so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. You put in all that effort and all that time. It's really cool that the digital kind of part of it to go into it as well, which is right down your field. So that's really, really
I mean,
cool.
They were talking about things from virtual sports to esports and things like that, and just seeing what sort of the possible direction of the Olympic movement was quite interesting. And then to be able to discuss that and study that with people from very different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages. I think in my study group, I was the only person in that group with English as their first language.
Really?
So I naturally got designated as the team's scribe. So I was always writing the assignments and putting them together. But it was really cool to see how people from different cultures and backgrounds could come together to study and learn how to work together, which is what the Olympic movement is all about. So it was nice to see that on a bit more of a micro level.
Very cool. And what is the difference? I mean, you talk about like working together and those values, but I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but kind of being able to go around the other side, right? Because I mean, you're a 4-time Olympian. Every single time you're going in there and you have that specific goal, and it's kind of hard to focus in on some of those, I guess, Olympic values or whatever, when you're like, okay, I have the goal of trying to go out and get a medal and do your best. I mean, you're kind of in that tunnel, at least until your event's over. And then it's like, then you get to enjoy it a little bit more, but just kind of speak about, I mean, how different was that?
Yeah, I can see what you're talking about there, because we compete in an individual sport, but at the same time, no one becomes a 4-time Olympian alone. There's very much a whole team behind me, both in the sense of my teammates on the Australian national team, but also my family, my coaches, support staff, the Olympic Winter Institute, our sponsors. It's a team. It's a team environment, and it takes a team to get me into the start gate. So I think there's that element of it. But also I think what we noticed on the World Cup Tour of Mogul Skiing is that we all have, yes, we're competing against each other, but we all have a lot of respect for what we're doing out there, because mogul skiing is not the easiest sport. It's not friendly on the body, and we're often pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone. So at the end of the day, we're happy for our competitors when they make it down safely, and we're also excited when they do something really cool. So everyone, if you stand at the bottom of a mogul course during a World Cup competition, when someone does something awesome, everyone at the bottom is like, woo. So I guess there's that element as well that I think reflects the values of Olympism.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it is one of those things when you're at the bottom and someone's doing something crazy down there, and it is such a difficult sport. I mean, how physically are you feeling? Like pretty good that you got out like fairly unscathed, or do you like roll out of the bed like, oh God?
The back's still pretty sore in the mornings. I think though my body probably felt the worst around about Pyeongchang in terms of my back. I had 2016, I had some stress fractures, and I remember having an MRI just before I went into that season, and the doctor said my vertebrae had the wear and tear of a 40-year-old. So I was like, all right, time to start looking after my body. And that's kind of when I started really like practicing yoga religiously every morning before I did any other training. I'd get up and do half an hour, 25 minutes of yoga just to get my body ready for the day. And that was a bit of a game changer, and helped, I guess, helped me with the longevity of my career.
Yeah.
So the body's okay at the moment. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah. I mean, do you think so as the sport kind of goes and with kind of some of those advancements, I mean, do you think you could see, because there's only a couple people that kind of stick around to kind of those later ages, and I'm sure part of that is financial. It's not like one of those other sports where it's an Olympic sport. Most of the Olympic sports, you're not making you're not in it for the money for the most part, right? You're in it for the passion and the love of it.
Definitely.
But do you're
getting paid in other ways?
Right, exactly. But do you think there's a way that you'll have somebody like 40 years old, like in there, 41, you think, or like a Tom Brady, or you think that there's too much in the future? Yeah. Or you think that's there's not going to be any snow, so it's not going to matter?
Yeah, maybe that's probably more of a worry at the moment. I don't know. I can't really see it at the moment.
I can't see it either. Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I did two middle sections a couple of weeks ago up in Perisher, and my back was so sore the next day. But I know that was just mogul back, and it was settled. But yeah, I mean, maybe it can be done. Whether or not it's smart is another discussion. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I think also throughout my career, I've seen such a change between the number of older athletes on World Cup Tour when I first started to now. There's so many young up and comers. Yeah. So it might not necessarily be our bodies holding us back. It might be more that the older skiers are getting pushed out because there's so much young talent coming through. So yeah, it remains to be seen. It's exciting.
Yeah, they'll all move on to the A-bomb, right? Get ready for that Masters event. That was pretty
exactly.
It was pretty exciting when we were there. Yeah. So for you, like kind of getting into sport and everything else, like what and even outside of sport, now that you're done, I mean, what are some of those things that's kind of driven you throughout your career, and that kind of continues to drive you? And you kind of touched on, it sounds like you got that little bit of excitement about kind of a new challenge and kind of going into a new area, but what just has driven you through your career, would you say?
I think if we look back from a very young age, I'm one of those what did you call it? I think younger sibling syndrome people. So I have an older brother, Hamish, he's 4 years older than me, and he was a mogul skier as well. So we grew up in a small country town in northeast Victoria in Australia, which is at the base of a mountain called Falls Creek. So in the winter, we moved up to Falls Creek where Mum and Dad ran an accommodation business. So we were very, very lucky to grow up in that winter environment where we could go skiing after school. We rode to school on my dad's snowmobile, and my brother and I'd ski after school until the lifts were closed, and then keep skiing because we'd go off in the trees and build a jump. And basically I just wanted to do what Hainbo was doing. I wanted to be like my older brother, and he would coach me and I'd chase him and his mates around the mountain. And then my family are also quite passionate skiers and passionate about freestyle skiing in particular. And when the 2002 Olympic Games were on in Salt Lake City, we were watching that on TV, and that's where those were the Olympic Games where Australia won their first gold medal at a Winter Games. So Stephen Bradbury Camplin, right? In the skating, yep. And then Elisa Camplin in aerial skiing. So for me, as an 8-year-old watching that, I was just incredibly inspired. I just thought she was amazing, and I was like, I want to be like her. And I remember watching that and thinking to myself, like, how much, it had so much of an impact on me. And I thought, I want to be, one day I want to be the best in the world at something. And I didn't really know exactly what sport it was going to be at that time, but I knew I wanted to be in a position where I could influence other young women like Elisa had for me. So very quickly started competing in Australia. We have this thing called the Interschools, which you probably saw when you were up there. It's absolute mayhem. I think it's the biggest organised sporting event in the Southern Hemisphere or something, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's wild.
Australia is known for summer sports, but you got thousands of kids competing in all different skiing disciplines. So I did that from the age of 8 years old. I did all the different skiing disciplines, but moguls was the one that stood out to me. And I had my brother on the sidelines coaching me up, and I just loved the variety of in the sport, the aspect of skiing, jumping, and speed. And but I think the thing I loved the most was competing. I loved that adrenaline and excitement. So that sort of got me into the sport, and I was always driven by that goal of wanting to make an impact and be like Elisa Camplin. I remember reading her autobiography like nearly every night. I'd be there in bed just reading it cover to cover. It was almost like my manual, my how-to manual. And then, just dreamt of wanting to win an Olympic gold medal. I think I wanted it more than I wanted to breathe. And then put myself in a position where I had the opportunity to do that in 2018, where I went into that season as world champion, world number one. So I was very driven, I guess, from that age of 8 years old to 2018 of like, that's, where I want to be. And I focused on that almost my entire life, training. And I was second into the super final. And then as I hit the top air 360, made a mistake, and just kind of blew the run. So it was like in the space of 30 seconds, my dream, it felt like just slipped through my fingertips. And I think I handled it pretty well in the moment, but when I was sort of behind closed doors, I was an absolute mess. I was heartbroken. I felt like, I'd not done what I'd set myself out to do. And I had to, when I came back home to Australia, I had to do a lot of soul searching and reevaluate what I was doing moving forward, and my why, my purpose. And I had to remind myself, because I think a lot of people viewed that as like, it was like a loss. Like I didn't do what they expected me to do, Australian public. But I don't think any of those expectations were as big as the ones I had on myself. So I had to really dig deep. And I kind of realized that I thought back to why I started mogul skiing in the first place and what was driving me throughout those 10 plus years of training was that I wanted to make an impact, and I wanted to show people the positive messages that sport has for us, not just as athletes, but as people.
Sure.
So the last sort of 4 years going into Beijing, that I kind of came back to that and tried to remember why I was mogul skiing every single day, and thinking about that rather than the outcome and the gold medal. So yeah, that was sort of how that shift of what was driving me to be a mogul skier changed throughout my career, or sort of I kind of did full circle and came back to what was driving me in the first place.
No, I mean, it's always interesting, like back at the base when you're that young little kid. And I mean, for me, it was watching Johnny Mosley in 1998 in Nagano. It was like running around like the couch with like American flags and just totally freaking out. And I was like, all right, this is what I want to do. And it's one of those things that, that Olympic spirit and the Olympics, how much it brings you all together, and how many lives it continues to touch and influence. And
yeah, absolutely.
how many people you've clearly inspired in future generations. I mean, to be a 4-time Olympian, world champion. And I mean, there are always those highs, and there are certainly always those lows, but sometimes it's the lows that makes it all better. You learn so much
absolutely.
more from those damn mistakes than you do when you're on top.
You really do. You're forced to I think learn these lessons. But I would say I actually have zero regret for setting myself those goals, because I think if I hadn't have set myself those goals, I wouldn't have become world champion or gone to 4 Olympic Games and had the incredible experiences that I had along the way, developing myself as a skier and a person, and meeting some really cool people from all around the world, and becoming really close with my teammates are basically like family to me. So it's sort of all of those things that I can now look back on and go, like, I have no regret that I set myself those goals. And then sort of realizing, I guess, after I retired, that I didn't actually need that Olympic gold medal to have an impact and to live true to my values, and I guess spread the positive messages that sport has. I've been approached by a lot of schools and parents and even young athletes that say, like, I do sport because of you, or I took up mogul skiing because of you. And to me, that's like, I've done my job. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, super, super inspiring. And it's amazing all the people that you don't think that are like paying attention or aware, and to have that kind of happen and that response, them come through, and just, like, that's awesome. It really, really is. So now touching on, we touched on it a little bit, just like some of those failures, but what else would you say, kind of perseverance, and how much of a role has that kind of played? Because I know, I think it was the 2014-15 season, kind of building up into that 16-17 where you just like blew the field out of the water. It was 9 podiums, 7 wins. I mean, you kind of ran away with the globe that year. And I mean, obviously doing that put more expectations, right, and more pressure going into 2018 of Australia. Like, okay, I mean, clearly we're expecting you or whatever to get the medal, and just kind of go through kind of dealing with that process, because that's not easy to kind of go through. And the expectations shift pretty quickly, like from one thing, you're kind of in rhythm and you're riding that wave, and it's like, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. This is easy, and the scores are coming in. It's all kind of clicking.
It was definitely, it was a fun season that year. You're right. 2014-15, I had a bit of a shocker. I remember coming home from that season like, what was that? What did I do wrong? So there was a lot of, I guess, fire in the belly in training that year. But that was kind of when my back issues really started, and I wanted to train a lot more, but I kind of had to. That was the first time in my career where I really had to be diligent on quality over quantity. I think I was known for doing very high volume up until that point in time, and then being told by physios and the doctors, like, you can go to Zermatt and train on the glacier, but you can only do 5 runs a day. So it's like, boy, I better make every run count. And also had to rely a lot more, I guess, on my mental skills training than the actual physical training. And then, so going into that 2016-17 season, I remember being back in Australia about 2 weeks before I was meant to leave for Rooker. And my back was not good. And I was even thinking, like, I don't even know if I can get on that plane in 2 weeks' time. And I was a bit worried. But I worked really hard on rehabbing and all the yoga stuff that we were talking about earlier. Went over there to Rooker and just continued to be diligent with that quality over quantity, and then found myself in Rooker at the top of the podium, and I was like, all right, that wasn't so bad. It wasn't so scary. And then I just tried to keep the momentum going from there all the way through to Spain at the end of the season. So I guess it wasn't super easy. It was more about managing that volume and relying a lot, I guess, on the mental skills, which is something that I love. I've kind of always been, I consider myself a student of the sport. I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to reading books on sports psychology and mental skills training and things like that. So I definitely had to rely on that going into that season a lot.
And what's kind of your approach with some of those mental skills? I mean, especially if you read a bunch of those books, there's all the different ways of, some people love to, and that's why I like to talk about people on this show. Like, how do you organize your day? What helps you stay focused? You go through and you have all these different books that have different ways, and it's always interesting. And I'm always trying to figure out what's a better way to like make it click more, maybe for me, or maybe if it's like for one of the athletes I'm talking to, because I mean, that's one of the things I love. I mean, I got my degree in psychology, and I think it's, especially when you're at the level that you were at and the World Cup at the highest level that there is. I mean, it is all mental at that point.
Yeah. Oh, I think Phil said this on the podcast with you too, like so much of being a mogul skier is what's in between the ears. And I think I wouldn't consider myself a very naturally talented athlete, especially when it comes to the acrobatic component of the sport. So I feel like I was almost like, okay, I've got to play catch up somewhere else or overcompensate with something else. So I did a lot of, I'm a really big fan of visualization training or imagery. I think there's so much power in being able to visualize your goals, but also for skill acquisition and learning skills a lot faster. So I've been visualizing mogul skiing for over a decade, visualizing that perfect run on the movements that I need to do to be successful and perform skills successfully. I think there's something like, I remember reading, like, if you, like, your body doesn't know the difference, or your neuromuscular, your nervous system doesn't know the difference between real or imagined. So, I mean, you can kind of trick your body into learning things faster. There's that neural patterning by visualizing. So that's something I jumped on that bandwagon when I was probably about 17, and just was able to apply that to my training and have that as another tool in my back pocket. Also, a bit of stuff about neuro-linguistic programming. I think there's a lot of power in another thing Phil said. I think we have some similarities here with this kind of stuff, is optimism. I think there's so much out there at the moment in that mental skills space about like positive thinking, but I've kind of come to learn that I don't think positive thinking is all that helpful, because there's an element where we do need to be realistic and also accept certain situations where things are not going well or not the way we want them to be, accepting them rather than just, I guess, disregarding them and going, no, everything's fine.
Yep.
But optimism, I think, is really powerful, and it sort of comes back to that element of self-belief and believing that you can achieve what you're setting yourself out to do. And yeah, so that's sort of that part of neurolinguistic programming that I like to use. Also, when I did start practicing yoga a lot more, I started implementing the less physical aspects of yoga into my training, into my mental preparation. So a lot of mindfulness, meditation and breathing techniques. I felt like that really helped me stay grounded and present in the moment when I was performing, especially during competition. So I guess you get to that point in the start gate up there before you compete, where there isn't really much more you can do to prepare. You've kind of got whatever you've done in training is over. You can't do anything more physically. All you can do is be present in the moment and take the opportunity to show the judges what you can do. So I felt like the breathing techniques that I learned in yoga were really helpful in getting me present and in the moment. And I think that's probably a big part of that was something that I used a lot in that 2017 season, to just not think about the the yellow bib on me or the pressure or expectation. It was just like, I'm here right now, one run at a time, and just being present. I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, that's really interesting that you touch on that, because I think it's so hard to find now with like social media and the phone, and just like it's one of those things where like, oh, I just got to look at something real quick. I just got to look at, and then next thing you know, like an hour's gone by and you've just been like not paying attention. Like, where's the day going?
Yeah,
and
when
being,
you're lying
present
in bed.
and lying in bed or something like that. It's I think it's super important to just like, what's going on right now, like around me in this moment. And I really do think that kind of makes a difference and allows you to kind of recenter and really like focus in on the things that are important, because like there's so much going on up there and so much of it like really doesn't matter, right? It's so much like white noise and just stuff that you're like, and it's like, no, that's not, need to come back from outer space, get back to planet Earth.
A lot of so much of our like stresses in life are more about like perceived worries rather than tangible things. It's like you worry so much about what has happened in the past or what may potentially happen in the future, rather than just being here in the present. It's like if you're worrying about something that might happen next season or the next competition, it's almost like, and then you get there, it's almost like you put yourself through the pain of that twice, rather than just being like, well, I'm here this week, I'm going to focus on this competition, and I'll let future Britt worry about that when I get there.
Future problems. Those are all future problems.
Yeah.
So, what a couple more, just, as you're making this transition and you have some of those tools. So how does that kind of help you, not only in your studies, but as you kind of go in, like what are like your favorite takeaways that you still like continue to use with your new preparation, right? It's still, you still have to prepare. It's just for something a little bit different. So how would you say you use some of those tools in like the non-sport world, kind of more business, like, as you turn that page?
Oh, I think those lessons that I was able to learn from mogul skiing can definitely be applied to the rest of my life. And I know this transition from athlete to post-athlete career is not going to be easy, and that's something I think that was part of my thought process of making the decision to retire, is realizing that it wasn't going to be any easier if I did it in a year's time or in 4 years' time, because I love mogul skiing, I love competing, and I don't think that's ever going to change. So it's almost like, all right, I've just got to accept that. But I think understanding what my key values are is really important, because that, like, it kind of coming back to what was driving me as a mogul skier, was wanting to have a positive influence on others, especially young people. And I can still continue to do that, even if I'm not skiing. And I feel like journalism and communications is a fantastic platform for me to be able to continue living out that why and that purpose, and applying my values to my everyday life post athletic career. So for me, that kind of looks like, I hope to mentor some younger athletes, and both in an like official capacity but unofficially as well. Like, I definitely encourage any young mogul skier to I hope they feel comfortable approaching me or reaching out to me for any advice, or just to be a sounding board. I love mogul skiing. It doesn't matter whether you're Aussie or not. I'd love to see people just wanting to get better at mogul skiing and do cool stuff on the mogul course. So I hope to be approachable in that way. I want to share the stories behind the athletes, particularly in women's sport in Australia, not just mogul skiing winter sports, but across the board. And just, I guess, spread the cool stuff that sport has for all of us. Yeah.
No, really being able to have those kind of key values, it seems like, is going to be the main thing to get you going into those next. And that's good to know, because it's it always changes from like kind of person to person, and so that's
and
really
it changes
takeaway
within a person too. I
sure,
think,
right,
at different phases in their lives. So that's why it's important to like check back in and go, like, are those values still as important to me now as they were 4 years ago? And so on and so forth.
Now, kind of piggybacking off that, how would you go about scheduling and kind of doing your routine now that you don't kind of have, usually us coaches have everything kind of laid out pretty far in advance, so you kind of know what's going on.
That's probably been one of the biggest things I've noticed, is not having that schedule, and having a lot more freedom to dictate my own schedule. I had a lot of advice when I first retired of not rushing straight into my next job or career and that kind of thing. So I did take the opportunity to do a bit of travel. So I'm really grateful that it wasn't injury or my body that forced me out of the sport. It was on my own terms. So I was able to kind of take a little bit of time to travel and surf and do some things that I wasn't able to do while I was still competing. And then it was sort of like, all right, reevaluate what my goals were and what that might look like. And now I'm just kind of plugging away at them and trying to piece a few things together in a way that aligns with my values. So in terms of scheduling, I think in the communications and media space, it's definitely not a 9 to 5 type of thing. It's a little bit all over the place. You can have very long days and intense periods of time and weeks, and then you can have a couple of weeks. So there's not much going on, but kind of, I guess I can draw on my experiences as an athlete of being like, all right, today we can't train because it's on wind hold. So what else can we do? And kind of looking at what is within my control as opposed to what isn't. And so right now, sort of in between a few different work things, so I'm maximizing the time to study and get ahead as much as I can with that, so that when I am back working again, I can direct my attention into that as well. Also really trying to be diligent with staying healthy and fit. I love exercise, I love training, and I'm still doing that a lot. I've got a lot of friends that love to cycle and do triathlons and that kind of thing. So I kind of make a point of continuing to train and have goals to work towards in that physical sense. But also it's nice now that I'm retired, I can kind of treat it more like a recreational or social thing. So catching up with friends for a bike ride or a run, and then doing it as a group rather than just being like, sorry, I can't come to that because I have this training set today or this thing. It's like, well, actually I can join in now, which is really fun.
Yeah, it's a little bit more relaxed when it comes to some of that stuff. So that a bit of a shift in priorities. Right. Yeah, no, which is a good thing. I mean, and if anything, I mean, you deserve it. You think about all those years and all that sacrifice that goes into it. And it is so much sacrifice and so much all for the unknown. I mean, you kind of can plan 100%. And prep and everything else, but at the end of the day, like it's all for an unknown. You never know how it's going to end out. But it does leave you with the fact that you at least will not have any regrets. It's always one of those things that I could never live with.
That's the thing, is like, you are working towards an unknown goal. So there's so much it's not within your control as a mogul skier. And that's something that I worked on a lot with my coach, Kate Lamy, over the last 4 years, was looking at what was within my control. And that, through COVID, that couldn't have been more valuable to be working on that. So there was so much that wasn't within our control. And it's like, well, if you focus on that, you're going to be miserable, and you're going to miss out on opportunities rather than looking at what you can control and even the things that you can influence. So I think, like, as a mogul skier, you can't control the outcome or the results, because you can't control what the other competitors do. You can't control what the judges, how the judges interpret your run, but you can influence it. You can influence that outcome by the things that you can control, which is your effort at training, how you apply yourself to every single training session, recovery, nutrition, all of those kinds of things. So it's kind of like every time your mind gets distracted to the uncontrollables, you redirect to what you can control.
Right. Now, one of those things that I'm not sure like a lot of people are aware of or know, but I mean, especially during COVID, I mean, you guys had to spend because you had much stricter lockdown policies and everything else. So, I mean, you were essentially on the road for how long? I mean, you were gone for a while. You guys were just like, all right, we're packing our bags, we out of here. And what was kind of I mean, I know it's, so crazy for everybody, but I mean, what was that experience? And I'm sure it, as you touched on earlier, your teammates are like family, but I mean, you spend so much time on the road with them and such a bond there, but just kind of what was that experience? Like
we all definitely, in the Aussie team, we all definitely became a lot closer over the last 2 years through COVID, especially for the many weeks we spent in Ruka.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we had our second home. I think we are now eligible for permanent residency in Finland or something. So, but yeah, so Australia had very strict rules around COVID, around quarantining and border controls. So not only were our borders closed to international travel, we also had a lot of state border closures. So I live in the state of Victoria, which is south, not the southernmost state, which is Tasmania, but they're almost they're considered a little bit external to Australia. Right. But next up is New South Wales, which is where Perisher and Jindabyne are. So this was before our new water ramp facility was built. We would water ramp in my home city in Melbourne. So we took the opportunity to water ramp quite late in the calendar year. So we were jumping in June, July, out at Lilydale in Australia, which is freezing. It's like 3 degrees when we get out there in the morning. But we weren't able to come over to Park City or to Whistler because of our restrictions on international travel. So we were jumping out there, and with the plan of heading up to Perisher to compete, to train on snow in end of July and then through August. We were jumping one day out at Lilydale, and I remember I did a jump and I was swimming in, and at the time Katie was on her phone listening to one of the press conferences. So they're having press conferences with the Victorian Premier every morning to talk about the case numbers and the new COVID rules. And she's looked at me as I was swimming in. She's like, Britt, can you please swim a little faster? And I was like, why? And like, I got out of the water and she's like, they're closing the borders tonight. We have to go now. And so raced home, threw everything in my car. And then we drove up to cross the Victorian-New South Wales border. I think we crossed at 11:30 at night, and they were closing at midnight just so that we could train up in Perisher for the season. And when we did that, we didn't know how long the border was going to be closed for, so we didn't know when we'd be back home and see our families again. And it ended up being 4 months. So we did the season at Perisher and then made our way up to Brisbane in Queensland, which is when the water ramp had just been opened. Our new water ramp, so we were able to train up there, which was awesome. But there are many more situations like that where we kind of had to do a border dash when we found out that the state borders were going to be closing. So we had a joke on the team that we ended up having to have a grab and go bag ready at all times.
Grab and go. You never know when you had to kind of dash across and make it through. Yeah, I mean that's crazy, especially and then once you guys, Ruka's the second home. Is that the one thing you're gonna miss most about the travel, is Ruka?
Yeah, I actually like Ruka. Like it's different, but I love the training there. I think it's so good for training Ruka. You've got you're not driving anywhere. There's no commute to and from training, so you can do 2 sessions on snow. You can stay on the hill or finish as earlier as long as you want, because you're not relying on the rest of the team to get in the car and head home. So it's kind of like you train your own time. You can stay out there as long as you like. And I think because it's so cold, the course doesn't change all that much. It's fairly consistent, which is great for training. It's not like you're out there every day digging out the transitions. And under lights, great visibility. it's a challenging course as well, which is fantastic for training. And then also the opportunity to train there before the World Cup is really good too. Also loved, we got into cross country skiing when we were there for most of the season during that COVID year. So I really enjoyed that as well. And I've spent a lot of time in Ruka, so it does feel like a bit of a second home. And once you can get used to the darkness and the cold, I think it could be a pretty good place to be.
So what are some of those other kind of favorite stops or favorite courses along the way, or just places to travel? I mean, because I would say your team, or, you know, the Aussies more than any other. I mean, you guys really pack up and go on the road and definitely log in the most airline miles. That's for sure.
Yeah. It was very nice when I was able to go over to that Young Olympic Ambassadors program to travel without a ski bag. That was so good. But yeah, so I think 2016, 17, I spent 228 days away from home. So yeah, a lot of travel, but I would say Deer Valley is absolutely my favorite stop on the World Cup tour. It was my first ever World Cup back in 2010, just before Vancouver, and the place where I did my first World Champs, had my first podium. It's just competing under lights with a massive crowd. It's a really special feeling. And also it's such a fun crowd too. There's so many people there that love freestyle skiing, and they get around it. It's like a big freestyle party. And it's definitely the Super Bowl of mogul skiing. So Deer Valley is definitely my favorite stop on the World Cup tour. I also loved having the opportunity to go to Alpe d'Huez last year in France. That was absolutely stunning. I'll have a lot of FOMO when the team are there this year, and absolutely beautiful place. Where else have I loved? Competing in Japan. That was always a lot of fun. I remember they just have up the side of the course in Tazawako, they'd bring all the local school kids up to watch the competition, and they just like be screaming the whole time. They just love mogul skiing in Japan. So always felt very welcome in that country.
No, that's good. So, I mean, are you planning on doing any vacation skiing this year? Like, yeah, I'm actually just going to fly somewhere and go ski for like 5 or 6 days. Have you thought about that, or no? You spend enough time doing that and kind of.
I spent all my holiday time this year going surfing, going to warm locations. So I don't think I think I need to earn some money first.
Gotcha.
But there is a chance I'll be at a few different stops on the tour this year, in a more of a working capacity, either in sort of like media, in a media sense. So hopefully I'll get to see some people throughout the season and watch mogul skiing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So for some of those younger people out there, you know, one of the always things that I like to have the guests just kind of speak to a little bit or talk about, or, you know, what kind of words of wisdom, or, you know, I mean, we've touched on a lot so far, but just kind of maybe when things aren't going well, when things are going well, I mean, what kind of things would you share with them to kind of help them through whatever their journey may be, whether it's skiing or it's completely something different in athletics, or they're kind of going through school and heading into different, you know, opportunities in life.
Yeah. It's good you brought up school just then, because I think that that's something that I needed to apply. What we're talking about earlier is the things I can control and I can't. I studied, like I was still at high school when I got onto the World Cup tour. So I was studying on the road. I remember studying for my final year 12 exams over in Zermatt. And, you know, on those weather days that you have when you're waiting, I'd be like studying for my exams, and then you get the call up, like, the lift's open, let's go. I did a lot of study on airplanes and airport lounges, on trains, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think that's probably the best advice I can give is honestly just looking at what you can control rather than what you can't, and making that distinction of like, okay, maybe I can't control this, but I can influence it. And I think that can be applied to any area of your life. And it's something that I find myself coming back to time and time again. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice. And also to learn from everyone around you, whether it be from their successes or their failures. I think that's something I really tried to apply throughout my career, is learning from all the people around you, whether they be your competitors, your teammates, coaches, family, athletes from other sports, other people that have been successful in other areas of their life, like business or the arts and things like that. I think there's something to be learned from everyone. And just, yeah, I guess always be curious.
Always be curious. Yeah, I like that. So one of the other things that I was just curious, or you had touched on that Elisa Camplin autobiography. So are there a couple other, kind of books along the way that kind of have inspired you, or you have those great takeaways that you kind of really, because I'm either to do an audiobook version or something. I still have about 12. I'm still backed up by about 12 books, I think. So
I think I've got
a good stack. Yeah,
I've got a good stack like this next to my bed.
Well, I have people on and I ask this question, and then I'll be like, oh, okay, I'm going to order that book. And then it's like, I can't get, there's not enough. The audiobooks have kind of helped me stay on pace a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good way to do it. I think I need to jump on that bandwagon, because at the moment, whenever I pick up a book for like my own personal growth and development or enjoyment, I feel a little bit guilty, like I should actually be studying right now. But so I have my amazing housemate, she's my best friend, and she's actually a trained mindfulness practitioner, meditation teacher, and she did a PhD in athlete wellbeing. So we have this amazing big bookcase of books on all those kinds of things, so mental skills, performance, mindfulness. So plenty to choose from, but there's definitely a few favorites that stand out to me that I'd recommend to people. And one of them, you probably haven't heard of it because it's an Australian author, but it's called The Resilience Project. And it's a very easy read. It's something, I know one of my friends has a 13-year-old daughter, and she's recently asked her to read one of the chapters in it. So very easy read, but it's also hilarious. So
you're saying I might be able to read it.
Well, what I'm saying is it's a book for anyone. So it's basically this guy who was a school teacher, and he's written this book, and it's just all a bunch of short stories from his life and people in his life about gratitude, empathy, and mindfulness. And I think there's something that those are things that everyone could probably do with a little bit more of in their life. And it's also just hilarious. He has some really great stories in there. He's recently come out with a second book as well called Let Go. But the Resilience Project, I have it right here, so I can show you the cover of it.
Oh, perfect.
I'm not being paid, by the way. I'm not being paid to show this. But,
Resilience Project. Okay, perfect.
Hugh Van Collenberg is the author.
Awesome.
Another one, I think my favorite book is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Sure,
probably a little bit more
that's a classic.
A bit more serious than the Resilience Project. But also, a lot of good gold nuggets of info in that one. And then in 2018, I did my yoga teacher training, and one of the required texts for that was a book called Into the Magic Shop. And this is another one of my favorites. It's written by a guy named James Doty, and he's a neurosurgeon. And it's kind of a biography, but it's also like a really nice story about his experience of learning the value of meditation and mindfulness and compassion, and how that can be applied to his life as a surgeon. And I think I really like the book because it explains those concepts that are often stereotyped as being quite spiritual and a little hoomy-goomy kind of thing. But hearing it from someone who's a medical doctor was nice to hear it put in a different light, and just kind of, I think, gives credibility to those concepts, a bit more credibility to those concepts. But also a really nice story. Into the Magic Shop, that one's called.
Into the Magic Shop. Okay, James Doty, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, taking the time and getting to chat. Hopefully we'll get to do this again, like in Australia, and I'll bring all the stuff down and we'll actually like do it, in there.
Yeah.
When you come
over to compete in the Avon Mogul Challenge?
When I come, yeah, I think I'm probably eligible now. I think I'm probably,
Yeah.
yeah. My
Well,
G1s, I mean, I don't know. It's going to be tough on those things. Those things will be
fine. It's fine. I've got some skis for you if you need.
Oh, perfect.
But if you do it next year, I'll do it as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. I just want to have my wife screaming at me at the top. It's like, you suck. It's terrible.
That's when, it depends whether she's in coach mode or wife mode.
Right. There's those two different modes, and you got to be able to know which one. Yeah.
It's time for her to get a little bit of payback.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Twist the knife in there. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. I really appreciate you coming on, and I really look forward to seeing where your journey continues to take you, and where those key values will bring you in your life. So thank you so much,
Bobby,
Britt.
and thanks for everything you're doing for mogul skiing. I think this podcast is appreciated by everyone in the mogul skiing community. So love your work.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching or listening on YouTube, please make sure you hit that bell button so you get notified every time a new episode drops. Thanks.